Welcome back, friends. Episode number 113 of the Behind the Badge podcast. This happens in Rochester, New York, in Monroe County. I'm Todd Baxter, Monroe County Sheriff, and we often talk about things that are unique or going on in the Sheriff's Office. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about crime, in particular stolen vehicles and how they're impacting areas of the community you might not expect, like the insurance industry and the car dealership industry. And we've been talking to crime victims a lot about this and police officers. We thought I'd get a couple different perspectives on it. But before we even start that, Tiz, happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year,
My
Sheriff.
co-host.
Yeah, it's great being back. Being back in the saddle is beautiful.
Yeah.
And like I said,
They
just
write
watching
songs
my
about
Steelers.
that back in the saddle.
I heard that too,
I know
actually.
you're a country guy.
Yeah,
That's
just watching my Steelers win. It's a good feeling. The holidays are well.
That's funny. Perspective is all about it. Nick, right before we started the show, it's like, I don't want to talk about the Steelers. He's a Steeler fan. You're like, I'm watching it. It's all with the glass half full, glass half empty with the Steeler Nation now, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The highs are very high and the lows are
They're very low.
Exactly.
So,
When's Big Ben coming back?
Oh,
I wish it was 6
at
weeks
some
ago.
point where I thought we were going to need them.
That's awesome. Well, Happy New Year. College fan by any chance?
Yeah, I watch college, but I'm a
college
Syracuse
championship
fan,
game coming
so,
up?
Yeah. That's
Oh, you're talking football. I'm talking football. You national championship. You guys going to watch that?
I actually find it to be quite interesting. I read that this is the first year since 2015 that a team from the SEC wasn't represented in the final.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's really interesting to me.
Good trivia.
Yeah, I like that. I like
Good
it.
trivia.
The guy already knows.
And Tiz, I think you were going Syracuse basketball. I mean, there for a second.
No, I was going to say
All
Syracuse football. So that's
Okay,
why
gotcha.
That's why I was kind of taken back.
Right. Yeah. Syracuse basketball played a great game the other day against Duke. Well, at least 3/4 of the game was a great game, and then I think they went to sleep or something. I don't know what happened after that. But that's not here nor there. But listen, we're going to talk today about this prolific problem here in Monroe County, across the nation. But Monroe County is off the charts. 4,000 stolen vehicles last year. Think about 4,000 victims created. So we brought Nick in. You already heard Nick talk a little bit about his expertise in the football arena, and but we'll let him introduce himself. And Evan, thank you for joining us. Talking about the industry from a different point of view, and just share your perspective. That's what we're looking to do. But first, who's behind the badge? You guys are now here. So maybe Nick, you already been talking just a little bit about who you are, what you do for a living.
Sure. I'm the managing director of Elmwood Agency currently. We've been in business for about 3 years. I have 3 partners that are in the industry. We have offices in Rochester and Buffalo. We're licensed in numerous states too, so I get some exposure outside of New York State to really understand, the perspective of how bad this problem has been and isolated to a particular area, not necessarily just as an entire country issue, but it is a very regional issue that it seems to not have been addressed, but yes, it does happen to have here. But I've been in insurance for 18 years. Mm-hmm. I did some commercial insurance at Paychex for just a few years. I was an Allstate agent for 8 years. I had 3 locations there. When that ended, now 3 years ago, ended up, long story short, partners with a few prominent individuals in the area who have concerted effort to really increase the volume and grow this thing rather quickly. So in the short 3 years we've been in business, we're a little bit over 11,000 customers now. But it's spread all around New York State. So again, exposure is paramount for us. So Rochester, Buffalo, Binghamton, Syracuse, upstate, downstate, you name it, we're all over the state. And we grow by about 400 families a month.
Good. Wow.
So that's pretty much where we're at right now.
It's a great number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that flywheel spinning, huh? The business model. It's good. Now let's keep the momentum. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we're looking to see again today of this stolen vehicle problem. What does it look like from your perspective and your stakeholders that you work with as we try and share the breadth of this problem, how it affects so many people in our community, not just the police officers, but the 4,000 people that were victimized. It affects other people, and including the car industry. Maybe a little bit about yourself before you even get started, Evan.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Evan with the Bob Johnson Auto Group. I've been a general manager with them since 2021. I got my start in the business 17 years ago now with the Dorsal Group and became their general manager before they were acquired by Bob Johnson a couple years ago. Similarly, a group that, you go back 5 years, there were 3 Bob Johnson locations. Now there's 22, right? We've got so much of Rochester with Greece and Henrietta, and then out to Pulaski and Watertown as well. So, and as you were mentioning, some of the differences between states, even within our state, the difference between our market and the upstate, Watertown, Pulaski, their experience of this is
Right.
Totally different.
Totally different.
Totally different.
I love that perspective because we don't get it. We're Monroe County Sheriff's deputies, right? And we deal with I say it all the time, our sphere of influence. Don't worry about what everybody's doing, but it's nice to get that perspective of what's occurring here and why it's different or how it's different. The why is a different story. But before we jump I got to go back to Bob Johnson Chevrolet. Did you guys make your numbers this year? Or you were fighting for the number one again?
Oh, they did very well.
Yeah,
They
okay.
did very well.
And then Mr. John Love, who I'm just a huge fan of. Just incredible. You got an incredible company there. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and the respect is returned. It's one of the things as a dealer group. I mean, me personally being out there at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning a number of times this past year, and your guys are always there. They're always calm, collected, respectful, and just we've seen too much stuff over the years of they're taking it from everybody not being. Really not being on their side, and they're still showing up every day doing what they've got to do and making it so that businesses like us can exist. We couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too. It's got to be a rough thing in today's day and age, the way things have changed. We talked a little bit offline, like you said, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. You got, cars being taken, cars being stolen, and not just the fact of cars being taken and stolen, the fact of dealerships today aren't like dealerships were back then, where you could just ride by and you'd be like, hey, I see a car over there, let me take a look at it. Now you got cars that are more or less being towed away from off the lots or being taken off the lots. Yeah. And that's got to do a huge disservice or, somewhat affect the car dealership as well. But how do you take care of that? It's just like a constant surveillance.
Yeah, it's funny because I said I've been doing this for 17 years in Henrietta, and when I got started, it was not even on our radar. Right. We never had to worry about a car being stolen. I mean, you talk about it, you set processes in place to prevent it, but it didn't happen. Right. For 5 years, I was like, yeah, you remember 5 years ago that car got stolen that one time?
Yeah.
That was it.
Right.
A war story.
Yeah. And now you look at the last 2 years, the investments we've had to make well in excess of $250,000 just in infrastructure preventing key theft and preventing car theft and maximizing key control, and then the personnel expense of adding live patrols in Henrietta. We've never done that. Right.
Now you're going to have live patrols patrolling.
Yeah. So now you've got live folks there, and you're, hey, good news is gainful employment for some folks, but those are expenses that we never would have occurred before.
Correct.
Yeah, you think about, let's just try and paint the problem of stolen vehicles here in Monroe County and then bring it back for both of you gentlemen, how it's different in other areas you're responsible. By the way, going up Route 81 one day and my head almost snapped, like, Bob Johnson? Sure. Bob Johnson? I didn't know that. You guys are all over.
Beautiful stores there right off.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's stunning. The 4,000 vehicles stolen last year, we've talked about that many times. We've had victims of those crimes in here, talking about there was one lady who drove school bus for years and years and years. She retired for a week. They had to go back to work just to pay for the stolen vehicle, right? That someone stole from her. Just unfair. We realize that. And that 4,000 rippled through that whole household, right? So if you've got an elderly mother that needs to go to the doctor, you got a kid that needs to go to a sporting event, you got insurance claims, you got parts delayed coming in. It's months and months worth of work, let alone the financial. But then you got the insurance business, and we hear a lot about that. What do you do with all these claims? And I'm sure you didn't even have the capacity to do 4,000 additional claims. And then you got the folks that are storing, inventory is huge in your world. And so I want to talk about some of those things, how it affects other people. But one of the things that we hear a lot, Nick, and I talk to a lot of people about this problem, and the backlash is, well, the insurance companies are going to cover it. That's one of the things I hear all the time. I absolutely laugh at them, like. But they're a business, right? And the other part is, well, they won't cover Kias anymore or anything like that. So you may or may not have any information on that, but maybe just some background. We're here to educate people what's really occurring.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a disingenuous talking point. And what really doesn't sit well with it is it's made as just a matter of fact.
Right.
Where, the insurance company will cover it. Okay, well, let's talk about this problem and really dissect it from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. The individual that owns a Kia or a Hyundai, maybe that person is of a specific demographic, income level, etc. The majority of the times when the insurance settlement comes through, say that person has negative equity that they rolled into.
Right.
Say they didn't buy gap insurance on their loan. Say that vehicle isn't worth what it once was, and the settlement check that they do get is now a vehicle that maybe they can't drive, they have children that they're feeling is unsafe to do it.
Right.
It goes beyond the peril of just being able to get to work and back. the financial aspect of it is, yes, there is a trickle-down effect of it. It's not just, the money in, it's just covered by insurance. That's not the matter of fact. The matter of fact is, if the insurance carrier is simplified into a pool where us four are throwing a pool of money in, where I actually am in a unique position in that, being a managing director of an insurance company, I was also part and privy to forming an insurance company. So I really see how the sausage is made in the background.
Right.
And what they don't really understand is there's something called a combined ratio with an insurance carrier. And this affects, Bob Johnson as well. So that is essentially money in versus money out. Anytime it goes above 100, that means for every 100 they're putting in, they're paying out 107. Well, what people really don't notice is over the course of the year that COVID has gone, the New York State Legislature wasn't approving rates either fast enough or enough to keep up with the inflation, supply and demand, goods and services, et cetera. And now it's become a really hard market, and what we're really running into is a crisis of availability. So for these Kias and Hyundais, it's not difficult for an insurance company to skate around having to insure a particular vehicle. And one of the insurance carriers that I have, if you didn't have the theft insurance system into it, you had a mandatory deductible of $1,500. Well, you guys know the statistics around financials for the average family, an emergency fund, et cetera.
Right.
That's not.
It's not there.
Not everybody's cash rich to afford something like this. So a $1,500 bill on a whim just because somebody stole your vehicle with no ability to recoup that money, it's very detrimental to the overall success. And then the insurance carriers are sitting here saying, okay, we have to purchase reinsurance on our money that's coming in because we're not collecting enough. We asked the state to approve, X amount of rate increase. They approved Y or didn't approve it at all.
Right.
Well, what do you expect us to do? So what they're doing is they're creating guidelines that are so strict that if you have one of these vehicles or you don't fit into a perfect credit score, you haven't had the same carrier for 5 years, we're just not even going to write you because the reinsurance cost in Rochester might be, $2,000 or $3,000 just to pick a number, and then you go up to Waterloo and it's $500. Well, the rates look fundamentally different. So not only is the trickle-down effect where you can't have the access and availability to even get it covered, but financially, it's certainly it's not economical to insure it anymore. That vehicle could be more in insurance over the course of 3 years than it would cost to buy a new vehicle.
Think about that.
And these people have loans on it, so it's mandatory to carry the insurance and the collision on it.
Correct.
So you can't decrease the cost of your insurance. It spiders off into so many different
people don't
avenues.
realize that's the point. Thank you for that's a great explanation of just the breadth of this thing. Just from the insurance industry, when people sit back and go, "Well, they got insurance," it's like you haven't even put a thought into what you just said, right? It's not that simple. Insurance just doesn't fall out of the sky, right? It's not something. You said something very powerful there. A pool, right? It's a pool of all our money. That's what insurance is, right? And you're in a business model to bring people in your business, but also pay them when they have a claim. And if there's not enough money in the pool, the money just doesn't fall out of the sky, right? But that's our mentality nowadays, is utterly backwards sometimes. Another thing. We say it all the time. We talk about retail theft. We got huge details on stolen vehicles, retail theft. We're doing deep dives in some of these retail, some of our big box stores. I'm working with them. I'm making hundreds of arrests and recovering millions of dollars worth of stolen property. But what we clearly showed is that's an underreported data set for us. The box stores are just not reporting. The grocery stores are just not reporting all the larcenies that are occurring by millions and millions of dollars here in Monroe County. But one of the things I have to get reported almost every time is a stolen vehicle. So when I look at stolen vehicles, I'm going, that's pretty good data. It's almost like, an assault at a bar. A lot of people don't call the police; they just take care of it. But if you're shot, you got to call the police, right? I mean, that's good data. Shootings, so your good data, 4,000 spiked by almost 200%. Of a crime data point that's very measurable and very controlled when it gets measured. That's the breadth of this problem. And then just throw on top of that the insurance. That was a beautiful explanation. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it 3 or 4 times just to go,
it's a very negative
what the hell?
Experience.
For everybody. And how do you insure, and where I was going with my whole diatribe there was, we're hurting the poorest people in our community.
Yes.
That's who's getting hurt by this. The people that can't afford $1,500 deductible. Now what are they going to do? They got the same transportation needs they had before their car was stolen. Minding their own business.
Yeah. And like you said, it's the domino effect. Like I explained to you earlier, we talked offline. I have a sister that has like a Hyundai, and how it affects you mentally. She's gotten what she needs to get done, because I know a lot of insurance, Kia have done different things to try to remedy that situation, like installing different mechanisms on a vehicle, handing out locks, different locks, things like that. But the fact is, how do you ease today's customers out there with the fact of, you know what, I'm going to the store and to get my groceries like we talked offline. I'm scared to come out. Did I come out to an empty space where my car was? That's that trickle-down effect. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And these kids, and it also, to the officers that go out there and deal with that situation, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning from a call from a kid still in a car. And we talked offline. A lot of it seems like to me is the internet. The internet's it's got its positives and it's got its negatives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting thing to see all the different people up close in person and how they respond differently, right? So getting to interact with a lot of customers, you mentioned the blanket statement thing. There's one thing to not walk away thinking is, oh, you can't insure a Kia, right? Because there's still key insurance policies being written every day.
Right.
And it has definitely, there's a very wide range of effect. There's some folks who have found, yes, now my insurance got more expensive. In some cases, it got prohibitively expensive, right? There's some that found very, very little change, right? Because there's a whole lot of those factors of where they live and all the other pieces of their demographic, right? What was funny to see is how many customers, because the changes were made in the Kias a couple of years ago now, getting into the new Kia worked fine for them, right? Insurance wasn't an issue because all those changes have been made.
Right.
And some people will take that and walk away saying, well, Kia did something wrong, right? How did they, right? How could they build these cars this way?
Right.
And they completely missed that part of
Exactly.
there is no federal requirement to build a car with any of those devices in it.
I think what's
Right.
lost upon people is the last variable of that.
Thank you.
You have a loss ratio that trails you, like almost a social credit score, and it's your driving record. And the way an insurance company evaluates from top down, I mean, everybody looks at Bob Johnson like this big titan of endless money, and they're too big to fail, and who cares? Let's just steal from them. They can afford it. The problem is they have a loss history, and you do too. Mm-hmm. So every time you get into an accident, that goes into who you are as a person when you apply for insurance. Well, if you steal a Kia or a Hyundai, that goes on the person's loss record because in the end, the insurance has to pay out, and you can't get blood from a stone. So they can't recoup the money. So the only place they can tag it on is your trailing. So you may have a $10,000 loss sitting there on yours that was no fault of yours,
Right.
and it'll go down as a no fault. But the
Right.
bottom line is you're only paying $1,000 a year. That's 10 renewals for the insurance company for them just to break even on you. So the problem is after the fact, when you have that loss, getting into a new Kia, sure. But your rate now just went from $1,000 to now $1,900, not
Right.
because of the new vehicle, but because you are now a poor risk for them. The same thing happens for the dealership. So when you send in your loss report and they reevaluate how you have to insure your inventory, do you think that you're impervious to a rate increase? I mean, you have two choices. Either you self-insure or you use a carrier. And at that point, the carrier's seeing unfavorable loss runs. They're seeing that you're putting, an enormous investment in there, but you're still going to see a 20 to 30% rate increase every single year because your loss history is poor.
And we're talking today about motor vehicles, but just take that same analogy, if you will, and place it on any industry, place it on any business, because they're all dealing with criminality today. They're all dealing with the response to crime and out-of-control crime. And this is just one picture because we're talking about stolen vehicles. We could do the same thing in any industry here in Monroe County, and they're going to have the exact same story. Take the motor vehicle out and put something else in there.
Yeah, and that shows up in strange ways, right? So you think, okay, you follow the money piece, and you say, okay, there's all of these cars being stolen. They show up at dealerships to be repaired. Oh, well, that's got to be the best thing in the world, right?
Right.
You've got all these additional repairs, right? But you throw 5 times as many cars at a department to fix that. They were never built to handle that kind of volume. What does it do to the personnel? What does it do to the customer experience? Right, we live and die by customer experience. Right, that you don't become 22 stores without giving the best customer experience possible. You throw that kind of pressure on human beings to perform and deliver that experience. That is tough.
I don't love what's occurring, but I love how you guys are painting the picture that I wanted to do so on this podcast. I just wanted to paint a different point of view, different stakeholders. Right there, customer experience, which is going to affect your business.
Yeah.
Just because it's a capacity issue. The systems are being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible because, like you said, we only see it from one side. Like what we do the show behind the badges, letting them see how it is being an officer on the other side of the badge, So you get that other reflective look at it, and it's, when you hear it from a different angle, you can understand it. You can see it. Yeah, I mean, you might not agree with it totally, but you can see it.
It's amazing.
That's been some of the interesting conversation with customers too. That they're coming off of some of these experiences, whether they've got a car that's in service or they're now trading their car for a new Kia. It's funny because they've had this terrible thing happen to them, right? They've got that anger
Right.
about it. The anger has to go somewhere. And I've had so many of these conversations where the first place they turn it is towards the sheriff's department.
Right.
And I'm like, well, hold on. I've been with these guys. Some of these, I'm like, no, I was just with them last night at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they're doing a great job. They did exactly what they're supposed to do. They're picking these folks up every time.
By the hundreds.
Every time.
By the hundreds.
They're like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
I'm like, I understand. It does not.
That's a whole nother
right?
podcast.
It
Yeah.
doesn't.
It doesn't make any sense. You're
And there's
absolutely
not
right.
there's not a lot of places for them to place the blame because it's an issue that we really haven't faced in Monroe County. Take the sheriff's department hasn't done it. Any of the legislation really hasn't had to do it, right? The executive branch hasn't really had to do it. We're all kind of making our way through it at the same time. And that's what's really interesting is living with these people through it as they process all that and say, well, then it's their parents' fault. I'm like, well, I know a couple of the parents, they
fit to
don't
be
seem like
tied.
bad people at all.
Yeah,
Right? This is just, as a society, we haven't dealt with, okay, this is a generation of kids that's, I don't know, do they just spend more time with the TikTok stuff and the nonsense, and then this is what comes out?
There's-
The polarization of all of this, it just seems like it's in extremes. And the problem is no one takes a look at the unintended consequences.
Right.
They'll live inside that moment and they'll say, okay, insurance will cover it, or Bob Johnson can do it. Or they go down their list of people that they want to take it out on. And the first person would be the police department.
Right,
Well,
they
the
should've-
response wasn't adequate enough. And I said, okay, well then, I do this a lot even with employees. You can come to me and complain about whatever you want, and I get it.
Yeah.
But you have to come to me with some sort of tangible solution as to what you would do, because in order for me to make some sort of recommendation on
Right.
this, I would at least appreciate an opinion on it. Because
Yeah.
if it's nothing more than a complaint, that's just hot air.
Yeah.
So we sit back and we have to, unfortunately, live under these circumstances, and we're bringing light to it as much as we can.
Right.
And I think in the world of polarization now, these facts oftentimes are watered down by either a political aspect, someone's
Right,
personal
right.
feelings, something that is irrelevant to just what the nature of the economical effects of this happening really are and how it exacerbates into every avenue. And for those that don't think that it will intentionally affect you or directly affect you, you may be right, but it will indirectly affect you because you could be driving 3 Mercedes and you have the same carrier, and I hate
absolutely.
to rehash it again, but your rates are going to go up too. And they're like, well, I have a great driving record. And I go, it's not really about you.
Yeah, it's different.
It's about
pool.
everything
It's
that
a pool.
surrounds you.
Yeah, that's a great
it's
term.
everything that surrounds you.
And be very clear. We don't have the solution to crime, right? If I did, I'd be a billionaire right now, right? And I'd be the sheriff of the world. So I don't have all the answers. What I know is I'm law enforcement, and I have tools that I'm missing, right? But there are social, there are economic, there are structural, there are COVID definitely helped nothing in the world, let alone crime, let alone school teachers in your local school, right? My daughter-in-law's a school teacher. She's like, I don't know what happened the last 3 years, right? It's just different to teach. So it's all one big pool, again, using your term. But our world is public safety. When we grab a kid at 4 o'clock in the morning at their car chase, right, and he crashes into a telephone pole and doesn't kill himself,
Right.
or kill a family of 5, we at least should be able to give that kid a timeout, right? That's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
And we've gone so far here in Monroe County to undercharge that kid so we can place him in the Children's Detention Center. In other words, we charge him with a misdemeanor because we can get him to the Children's Detention Center, as opposed to a felony. I got to get him to the family court the next day and release him on an appearance ticket right now. Totally counterintuitive. That's all we're trying to get people, like, understand the breadth of this problem and then help us out. At least we got this kid at 4 in the morning after car chase. My father used to call it a timeout. Go sit down, think about what you're doing. Then let's intervene, right? So we don't have the solution, and we're not going to arrest our way out of any problem either. But there needs to be a consequence for bad acts. That's common sense, I think, in all our worlds, anybody's world, any parent's world. They know that.
I mean, it's really interesting. We have to carry errors and omissions insurance, we have to answer for what we do.
Oh, I love it.
So, that's the hard part for me. So I have to, talk to people and convince them to curtail coverage that's appropriate for the individual that I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
But in the end, if I do something incorrect, there are consequences to that action. And oftentimes it's, I'm putting my professionalism up against that. You run into the customer experience, you get bad reviews, but furthermore, there are consequences for, an adjudication of your duties,
Right.
an abdication of your duties, rather, to your customer base for not giving them what they needed in the time that they did. So you can be investigated on my end too professionally.
Right.
But it is interesting that it does exist, that
Right.
maybe there's an accountability factor that just doesn't exist right now that may need to. And as you said, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Trust me, timeout still exists.
Timeout,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
And I have 2 boys, and they're very high strung. So we use timeout effectively, and it does work.
Wonder where they got that from, huh, Tiz?
Right.
But you know, it's really quite simple. There needs to be consequences for actions. This is not political. This is not social economic. This is not any other. It's especially young men. Everybody at this table grew up a young man.
Yeah. I mean, if there's no accountability,
if there's no accountability,
you
we're
do the
somewhere
same
else.
thing over and over and over because
of
there's
course.
no accountability to it. So there has to be something. And like you said, the main thing is it's like a continual, pendulum, just back and forth. We're going through the same thing. When, like the sheriff said, when you don't, we don't have the remedy. We need help solving this. You know what I mean? And it's not just our department, but we need help from everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, it's probably often said our generation, my generation, is the generation of the abdication of responsibility, right? So how do we get that back, right? It's the same way we lost it. It's you and me and you and all of us and our families, right, espousing virtue and letting the people that are in our circle follow that as well, right? That's the only way we get there is everybody starts practicing virtue again. Right, a little bit better than we did yesterday, and keep pushing that, and having the people around you keep doing the same thing. It's the same mimetic desire that has somebody watch somebody stealing a car on a video and says, "Oh, I could do that." Well, no, watch somebody stand up and do the right thing when it's hard, right, and make them want to do the same thing. Yeah. It's the only shot we have.
I totally agree. So we grabbed hundreds of these kids stealing stolen cars last year. We grabbed hundreds of them. I mean, there's video in the B-roll here rolling, just the deputies out there chasing people all over, cars crashing, right, and they're foot chasing people all over. It's simply amazing. But even the sheriff who runs a jail, that's not the end result for me, right? Sorry. So we got the kid, we got him in that timeout, we got him detained. Who's going to that house, right? Who's knocking on the door and going, do you know where your kid is? It's 4:30 in the morning, you haven't even reported him missing. That's a concern. But also, that mom's scared to death, or she's fit to be tied. She's already dealt with him 15 times, and she's got 2 more kids she's trying to raise. And you keep them. We hear that sometimes. You keep them. Like, we're not babysitters, and we can't keep them by law anyway. So someone's got to take them. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. But we don't know. I love what you said there, and I'm drilling down to that. It comes down to that home, right? So we can't just laugh at people and say, oh, your kid's a criminal, right? We should go knocking on the door, because if we don't do anything with that house, we don't help that mom. They might have 3 kids. We don't at least look at it and see as government and social service agencies and nonprofits can go in there and stabilize that house. That's where it builds out. That's you know that I've been saying it a million times. It starts with the house, then it starts with the street, then it starts with the community, then it starts with, that's how when we come in government, we want to just throw money at big ticket items. And it doesn't solve anything. We've been doing it for a billion years. Just give them more money or do more of these programs. It's just not going to work. We got to get. So even with that kid that we're grabbing at 4 o'clock in the morning, my goal is to get some kind of intervention into that house, let alone into that kid, right? And see how can we help. Maybe they don't want anything to do with us. Maybe they tell us to take a flying walk when we get to the door. But at least as a government, we should go. We grab a kid with a gun nowadays. I can't believe we're not there with a little mini, for lack of a better term, SWAT team, but a team of social service workers, a team of pastors going, your kid's got a gun. He's going to be dead, or he's going to kill someone and go to prison for, how can we help you? Yeah. How can we stabilize this house? I love what you said, though, the house.
No, that's the thing that scares me about seeing you guys out night after night after night with the same people, right? Because every time there's an arrest made, that's a high-stress situation, right? And things can go wrong, right? The thing, and I've actually shared this with customers that went off on the police tangent. I'm like, no, that's not the issue. What happens when somebody that's been doing this for 20 years is in one of those high-stress situations and the kid does something stupid, right? Because that kid's not thinking either. At 1:30 in the morning, they're under the influence of what? Who knows? And they're obviously not thinking straight. Right. And they get into that high-stress situation again, and they do something wrong. Right? And now what happens? You've got the family of a 20-year veteran of the force who's done everything right his entire life, and his life gets ruined because we keep putting him back in that same situation. That's unbearable, right? I know you see it because these are guys that have reported to you for forever, right? But how do we keep putting them back in that same situation over and over?
At the point of almost like, as the boss of almost 1,000 cops, I'm like, it's unethical what we're asking these guys to do. It's immoral what we're asking these guys and gals to do, right? I had one deputy point a gun. They pointed guns at each other, a young kid and a deputy, twice in 1 year. Sooner or later, it's going to be it's a recipe for disaster. One of those two are going to eat a bullet. Both families are going to be destroyed. There's going to be upheaval. There's going to be, it's all bad. Yet when we go back and look, we as a community, we as a government didn't do crap with that kid the first time we had him. right? And that's just, it's immoral. It really is what we're doing. We're not doing that kid any favor, that's for darn sure.
I think the most interesting thing about a lot of what we're talking about is it's been studied. There are things that show the variables that we're alluding to that would lead to a better overall experience for the community,
Right.
that would lead to maybe a better legislation, decision, law, et cetera. And starting with the household, like you said, I mean, the FBI releases crime statistics. There are people who study, people who graduate high school are X amount more probable to be a member of the middle class, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the court of public opinion has become so diluted with the loudest voices and not necessarily the most intellectually sound ones that are just bringing a little bit more of a level-headed, because they're not throwing red meat at you, right? You're not getting me really riled up, so you're not placating to my emotional capacity. So that guy's boring. I don't want to listen to him. I'd rather talk to the person who, may scream and yell the rhetoric that gets you going and makes you feel good. But in reality, it's not the stuff that makes you feel good that is good for society in general. It's going to be the stuff that has been tried, true, studied, and maybe it doesn't need to change. Maybe we need to revert back to what we used to do and maybe just tweak it a little bit to give a better understanding of how we can move forward in this atmosphere that we're in right now, which is so polarized with social media and so polarized with government heading into an election year. I mean, I was just reading up on some of the Morningstar reviews. Do you know insurance carriers on the business side are now going to start taking rate on the speculation of civil unrest and upheaval, and they're going to take a look a lot more closely in the election years because that's when people become most polarized.
Right.
That's another monetary issue that people are going to look at in business in general. So it's weird to have it enter.
And it's all based on emotions, not logic, right? You guys run very good businesses that are based on logic. Emotions are part of that. It's part of your playing on the emotions of the customer, right? Making sure they feel welcome and comfortable and served.
Yeah, it's a human business, right?
But that's also logical that you do that. Unfortunately, a lot of our world right now is emotional, right? It's emotional based. Who can validate my thoughts, right? Or just trying to, again, recap this, just paint a picture from different industries, the insurance industry and, how that spider web goes out and that mentality of the pool and from the business that sells cars for a living, right? And provides a service, right? We love our car dealerships. I can't mention it here on the air because I'd be endorsing one. But no, I'm only joking. But the point of it,
3817 West Side Road.
that's an interesting. We would be, the used car dealerships down the street that sell other cars, right? And it's all one community. That's what people got to get through their mind. We're all one community, and when one person in the community gets hurt, we all get hurt, right? When one person in the community succeeds and gets better, we all get a little bit better, and that whole mentality's really got to change. The us versus them. No. When Bob Johnson gets affected, when your insurance agent gets affected, when a deputy gets infected, when the mom can't get her kids to the store, or to the school that next day, that's not just affecting 4,000 victims. That's affecting hundreds of thousands of victims throughout Monroe County.
I always say the interesting perspective on the dichotomy that exists to where if you're getting better, that doesn't mean that I have to get worse.
Oh, God, no.
That's the problem that I think people say is I don't have a problem with competition in my industry.
The abundancy mentality's got to be out there. There's some for all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you do better, your counterparts are going to do better. Your competition's going to do better.
That's one of the interesting things about this is seeing people, former competitors and current competitors, pulling together. And when we see somebody trolling our lots, we call each other.
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
street, right? Yeah, we're competitors all day long, but hey, I need you to just be aware you've got somebody in your backyard that was just in our scoping the place out. You just check it out, right? Yeah. So seeing those guys come together, seeing the positive actions that the manufacturers are making, right? We had them downtown. They were here doing an event to provide some of these things, totally outside of their scope, right? Everything, their whole business is built to do those kinds of repairs through the dealerships. They put the extra effort into coming into town and doing it directly.
Doing a drive-through for us.
Yeah, having them do that, having the the insurance companies just doing everything they can to help with the folks, and then the customers coming together. And some of it, it might be tough at first, but we get it. We're all in it together, right? All of these different pieces being affected by, thankfully, a very small percentage of our population.
Yeah, exactly. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of people committing these criminal acts. We're talking about 400, 500, 600 people. And the beautiful part about it is when people come in and talk to your industry about cops, we know every one of them by name. We got PowerPoint presentations on them all. We're done all we can do. We've arrested them how many times. What more does society expect of law enforcement? So we'll keep on doing our job. We actually enjoy it. But the fact is we're not a solution to the problem. Someone else has got to pick up that mantle, whether it's prevention and all the poverty stuff and all that, absolutely. But once they're detained and end up in Tiz's courtroom, there's got to be some kind of repercussions after that, or kids will be kids.
Yeah.
Criminals will be criminals. couple things I just want to hit on because we're going to go 50 minutes here. The abundance mentality. Let's leave on a very positive note. And I'll use Fairport as an example only because of the bumper music provided by Tommy Burnett from Fairport. So I'll give him a plug. But I was talking to him one day. He distills bourbon, all right, and he's got a bar. And he says the whole music industry has changed. Just here locally in Rochester, New York, where they support each other, where they go to, if you're having a concert tonight, I'll maybe have my concert the next day, right? They're not competing. They're supporting. And look what's happened if you haven't kept track of the music industry and the bar industry just in the town of Fairport, a little village, is off the charts because they got the mentality of abundance, right? They got the mentality we're going to support each other, we'll work with each other, and they talk about each other's restaurants and each other's bars. They're not, don't go there. They're like, try that someday. You'll like it. And we all grow together. It's pretty amazing.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
I was a very first timer at the Fairport Canal Days this
were
past
you?
year. Yeah. I went down there with my kids, and I can agree. It was actually a great time.
Fun.
It was a
It's
great
beautiful.
time. They had music all day long, a bunch of different local artists and vendors and whatnot. It was just, the overall experience was fantastic, especially even for two little kids. It was spread across a wide demographic. So
Yeah, and the music's great.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't real quick. I just wanted to touch base on like I told the guys offline. I had my brother. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and what was weird to me, and like we talked about earlier, it's like I spoke to him about what's going on here with the Kia situation.
Right.
With the automobiles being stolen or whatever, and this is where I think that laws make a difference to me. And he looked at me like he was dumbfounded. He was like, "What do you mean, Kias?" He said, and I said, "They're taking Kias like crazy." And he was like, "Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't hear about that."
Yeah. And they have Kias down there.
Yeah,
surprise, surprise.
And they have, you notice?
right. It's just an amazing thing how different things, different consequences. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for the sake of Kia, and they're not. I'll give you the stats. We clearly got the stats. They're not all Kias. It was just that
No.
that whole TikTok challenge and some things that could have been done a little different. With that, we pleaded with them. And a solution to the problem is not taking TikToks down. It's just like, well, when we call you as law enforcement and we say, hey, you got a problem. If they were teaching how to do another criminal activity like commit a mass murder, I hope they'd rip that stuff down off TikTok, right? That's just responsibility. And it became that challenge, right? But unfortunately, with that challenge in Rochester, New York, with no consequences, it just becomes a ball game. It becomes a thing to do. We were stopping vehicles, stolen vehicles, grabbing the kids, and they had placards. They were just going around stealing cars. See how many of the Kia placards they can get off them.
Yeah.
Like they had cards in their hand, playing cards. It became a joke, but it's affecting hundreds of thousands of people. That's the point I was trying to make with you guys. It's not even just affecting 4,000 victims of stolen vehicles. It's affecting hundreds of thousands. And every business in Monroe County is paying for this. And we got to stand up and go, this ain't right. We're going to do something about it. And we all have a sphere of influence on that part of it. But, guys, we can go on all day long. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else. But literally, we doubled our time of any podcast we've ever done. This is exciting. This is information that we didn't have before. I got educated a little bit more today. I think we're going to skip the no Miranda zone unless you want to throw one at them real quick, Tiz.
I'm all good. These guys, they're too knowledgeable for me, man.
So the no Miranda zone, usually it's a thing we do at the end of the podcast where we ask you questions you have to answer. You have no right to remain silent. That's why it's no Miranda zone. But we're going to let you off the hook, except what was the last TV show you binge watched? I told you. See, I'll get them.
Reacher.
Really?
That
was good.
I like that.
Yeah.
Good show.
That was
Yeah.
good.
I'm
Good
still
book.
watching it. I'm on season 1, last episode, and then it's into season 2, and that's because of my brother. He's
Have you read the-
shamed me enough.
Oh,
to do
really?
it. So I watched it, and it is fantastic.
Have you read the books?
I have not read the
Oh,
books
yeah.
yet.
It's when I'm traveling, those are my books to listen on tape. Last show you binge watched?
It'd probably be Young Sheldon with my my oldest daughter. Shout out to my oldest
Yeah.
daughter. So
That's
it was
awesome.
pretty hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Thanks for a little more of what's behind this badge and what we're all doing. One community, different perspective, different stakeholder groups. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.